What do you think? Do you like it? What? No. No. I think you need to go away. Hey, let's sculpt the torso. I'm gonna start with a sphere over here and quickly form the shape of the head. I'm not gonna get too much into details. I'm just gonna really get the forms in the front and the side and a little bit all around to look like a basic form of the head. So you can see how I'm working on the jaw over here. I'm just gonna push this forwards for the chin and then kind of shape the outline of the jaw on the side over here. And then I'll push this part outwards where the neck will go. And then I'll turn to the side over here, and in the front, I'll just push in the head a bit like this. And again, I'm thinking of the form of the head as an overall shape. More like details. I don't want to get too much into details at this stage because then you're going to get lost in working little details, and you won't look at the whole sculpt as a full picture, which you should do when sculpting. So it's good to really keep things simple at first. Just work on the proportions like that. Get something that looks like a head. And the reason I'm starting with the head is because that's a great way to basically determine the proportions, or it really helps with the proportions of the rest of the body, because then we can use the length of the head and also the width of the head in certain areas to basically determine the proportions of the torso and the rest of the body. So this is more or less good. It's fine. You don't want to make it too long because then the body will be a bit too long as well. So just this should do like that. And then what I can do is I can just use this. So instead of creating a new sphere, I can just use Shift D, duplicate this, put it downwards like that, and then go back to edit mode and scale it downwards and just place it right here. And then I can go to sculpt mode and then quickly sculpt the neck. So you can see how I'm using really simple forms here. I'm not adding in details at all. This is a very basic stage, and at this point you really don't want to work on anything but basic forms and basic proportions. So this is fine for now. I can grab this and use Shift D, put it downwards like that, and start with the first part of the torso. And this part over here, you can think of it as the thorax. So I'll basically try to form the shape of the thorax over here like that. And again, we're going to use the head as a way to determine the proportions of the torso. So what we can do is use our hands like this, and then I'll grab the length of the head over here, and then I'll just go downwards like that to the chin. And this first part over here is where the chest will be, where the nipples of the chest is. And then we can go down one more time. This is the belly button, and one more time is the end of the torso. So here I will just grab this area, get it wider like this. So I'm sculpting the thorax over here, but also adding in the shoulders like that. And I can use remesh right now. I can use Control R to remesh this part, since I'm really stretching it out, and it's gonna need more topology for us to be able to continue to sculpt this area. You can use the smooth brush like that, and maybe add in some volume over here. So I'm using hotkeys to move between these brushes. I just set them myself with a right click. You can change the shortcuts. So here with a draw brush, I can just increase the strength with the right click over here, and then I can quickly add in, as you can see, a lot of form over here for the thorax, because when sculpting, one of the beginner mistakes is not paying attention to volume, which is really, really important. And I talk about a lot of that in my anatomy course, which you should definitely check out if you are interested in learning how to sculpt. I'll add a link in the description below for that. But anyways, so again, this first shape over here is just a thorax. And I'm not worried too much about the muscles of the torso right now. I'm just worried again about the basic forms. So once I'm done with this, I can go over here, grab this neck, and then use Shift D again to duplicate it. So you can see how, just so that I don't waste time, I'm just using things I have in the scene over here. And again, I'll just use my hand here So this is where the nipples are. I'll go down one more. This will be the belly button. So I can make the thorax here a bit shorter, I guess, like that. And then I can take the other mesh that I just duplicated, and I can create the lower parts over here, which will consist of the abs and also the back part, so the spine over here. So I'm just going to use the grab brush and kind of shape this part. So you don't really have to be fancy with the brushes you use, especially at this stage, but really, generally speaking, when sculpting, you don't need 100 brushes to sculpt. Just a few of them will do the job. All right, so I can now go back and forth and improve the shapes a bit. So I'm gonna add in some volumes for this part over here. It's a bit thin, and basically just continue to sculpt this area. Go back over here and do the same thing like that. Okay. And then I can actually, I'm gonna go to the side over here and I'm gonna make sure that the proportions are a bit better like that. And then I can use Shift D to duplicate this again and just sculpt the lower part of the torso. And we can work on the proportions as we move on. Again, this is a very early stage, so it's very easy to go back and forth and improve the proportions as we sculpt. So this part is where the crotch will be over here, the start of the legs, the start of the bum over here, like that, and the oblique, so a muscle over here as well that goes to the front as well. So yeah, this is how you can do things, and keeping it while keeping it simple to have an easier time sculpting these forms. So again, this is a great way to start sculpting really anything, not just the torso. And you can see how, since I have really simple forms over here now, I can use, because this is obviously way off the proportions, the body's way too long over here. I can't see it over here, but this way I can show you that I can use the head again to determine. So this is the part of the chest over here, the belly button and the crotch. So this part has to go upwards a bit like that. And then I can go to this one and do the same, just like that. And then I can go to this one and just increase this part a bit, move it forward like that. And yeah, so you can see on the side here, I'm trying to keep a nice S shape, basically the curve of the back like that. But again, there's volume, so I'm pushing this part outwards because again, pay attention to volume when sculpting, and make sure you're using a lot of reference when sculpting. So while I'm making this video, it's hard to look at reference at the same time, so I'm kind of sculpting from imagination here. So you don't want to pay too much attention to the anatomy I'm doing over here. But I sculpted my fair share of sculpts, so I kind of know my way through anatomy over here without looking at reference, and I can get something that looks decent or that represents the torso without necessarily looking at any reference. But even when you're used to all of this, you want to look at reference when practicing because it really helps improve your work. So here I'm just using the snake brush, the snake hook brush to basically start creating the shoulders. I can use the grab brush as well, like that. And the shoulders will be part of the torso as well, so you don't want to ignore this part. And basically you have the clavicle over here. And again, I want to keep the shape simple, so I don't want to go too much into the anatomy of each part at this point. Just, you know, keep the shapes really simple like that, really big, and try to work the proportions at first and the shape language of the character you're sculpting, and then you can move forward and add in details. So I can definitely add the arms, even though it's not really part of the torso here, but basically I will just duplicate the neck, whoops, and remove the symmetry. I can move it over here, I can scale it and place it like that, and then I can just smooth it really fast, and just basically I can put it right under the arms over here, the shoulders, and this is where the biceps will go, like that. But maybe push it outwards a bit like this. Okay. And again, I want to keep the shapes simple even for this part. For any part you're sculpting, just always keep the shapes really simple at first. And I can go over here, just click on this and symmetrize to the other side to get some symmetry. And then I can use this for the next part of the arm, so the forearm. So I just duplicated it, and then I'll just move it downwards over here like that. I'm just gonna remove this other part here. Whoops, delete it. So yeah, I can just move it over here like this. And the first part of the arm will align to where the belly button is. So again, 1, the chest, 2, the belly button over here. And this is where the first part of the arm will end. And then the forearm will go all the way downwards to the crotch over here. So to the end of the torso. Like that. And yeah, for now, I'll just keep it at that. And I will use symmetry, so symmetrize over here, and then I'll continue from here. Now that I have the major shapes of the torso, I can shift and click these parts, use Ctrl J to join them, go to sculpt mode, and then use Ctrl R to remesh and basically join these areas. So I'll smooth out the connected parts over here like this, and then I'll use the grab brush and just quickly improve the shapes. So I'll increase the volume over here of the thorax like that, the back as well, for a wide shoulder as well, like that. So a muscular person basically. And generally when teaching anatomy, you'd start with these kind of forms to properly see the muscles. And then I can, let's see, I can increase the volume here as well. So I can see how I'm just using the grab brush to do that really. You don't have to get fancy or anything with the brushes again. And then I can use the crease brush, for example, to crease in the lower part of the chest. So again, I can use the head over here like that, go downwards once like this. And this is where the nipples will be. So I can just use a line just a bit under it and just crease in the lower part of the chest. So a straight line over here and then goes upwards a bit. And that's just the basic way to do it. Of course, each chest is different. The forms of every person will be a bit different, but this is just a generic form. All right. So here I'm using the inflate brush to inflate the thorax a bit like that, and making this part a bit bigger, like a superhero figure, like that. And then I can go back with the crease brush and continue to mark these areas. So I'm gonna crease in this area a bit here to mark the lower part of the clavicle, so this bone. And then I can go to this point over here, this little triangle that exists in every person, because it's the separation between the shoulder and the chest muscle over here. So basically I can just use the crease brush and do this like that. And you can see how the shoulder is part of this area of the torso. So it attaches to this bone, to the clavicle, like that. All right. And now I can use the grab brush and just shape the shoulders around this area. So you can see how I'm going under here to make sure that the volumes are right. And it's very important to do in sculpting. You want to pay attention to the form. Again, a lot of this is already covered in my anatomy course. I talk about form, about anatomy in a lot more depth. So if you're serious about learning anatomy, you might want to consider checking it out. So anyways, let's focus on what we got over here for now. And yeah, you can see how I'm just going around this part and just quickly forming the shoulders while still keeping it very, very simple. So now this is good. We have the chest, we have the shoulders, we kind of have the clavicle. We can always go with a Sculpt draw brush and apply some pressure over here like that. And then for the clavicle, you can push this part backwards a bit like this. And for the trapezius, so this muscle, this triangle muscle over here, we can, actually it has more of a dagger shape, but anyways, we can just increase the volume over here, just raise it a bit at the end so it has a nice shape like that, right? And then it goes all the way to this point over here. So I can use the inflate brush to add in some volume to this area like this. Very nice. And yeah, so for this part, we can just top right here. And then for the neck and the head, we can definitely improve the shapes a bit. So the head can be a bit wider probably. Let me just increase the width over here and work the form of the head just a bit, even though it's not really the main focus of this video, since we're focused on the torso. It's nice to have a form of the head that works a bit like that. All right, so I'm not going to change the length of the head too much since I'm using it for this proportion over here. And if I change it, I can. At this point, I can like increase the length over here a bit, but then I'd want to adjust the proportions of the rest of the body to go with it. So the 8 head proportion, that's what I'm using over here. It's just a basic way of quickly calculating the proportions of the body. It's not the only way. Every person is different and every person has a different proportion. Yeah, it's just an easy way to find some landmarks in some areas of the body. So here I'm gonna use the Sculpt Draw brush to connect the neck muscle, so the sternocleidomastoid, but don't worry too much right now about the names of the muscles or anything. So this big shape over here, like that, and maybe decrease the strength of the draw brush a bit. It's a bit too strong at this point. So the higher the resolution is, the more strength you'll need for certain brushes. Like for example, the smooth brush right now is too strong, so even a slight pressure over here will remove the form that I just created. So I'm gonna go to the smooth brush, which is this one over here, and just decrease the strength a bit like that, and that is much better. Okay, so I'm gonna continue with the neck muscle over here, and then just continue the form like that. Perfect. And go down over here and work this part a bit. So over here, I'm gonna work this part of the thorax. I like that I'm making it really wide, a superhero-like figure. That looks really nice. And then it gets really thin over here. Even though that's a bit stylized, it has a nice form, so I'm gonna keep it. Again, you wanna keep the forms very, very, very simple at first, big shapes, and work on the design of the character and the proportions of the character at this point. So here I will use, let's see, the clay brush, the clay strips. So it doesn't really matter which brushes you're using as long as it gets the job done. I can go back to the draw brush over here, just draw the abs like that, and the oblique, so a muscle over here that starts over here like this, and go all the way forward to over here like that. Very nice. So I'm adding form and I'm using the smooth brush a bit with shift to kind of smooth some areas, but I'm not overdoing it. I don't want to remove every change I'm doing with the smooth brush, so pay attention to that. And then I'm going to go back to the back over here. I'll use the crease brush and maybe add in a line over here, a dent for the back like this. Let me see from the side. So I'm going to maybe work the proportions from the side a bit. Move this area a bit forward, so the chest will be a bit forward compared to the head, like this. And then the shoulders will be around where the ears are, which is in the middle over here, like that. That looks good. And then we can continue to work the forms from all over. Maybe the shoulders here a bit as well. I'm just gonna, again, the shoulders is part of the torso. It will go to the part of the torso over here. So I want to make sure that I'm implementing that, and the shoulders will end to around where the bottom of the chest is. So this is why I have the shoulders over here. Okay. So far, so good. This looks pretty cool. So now I can just continue to work on the proportions a bit. I have a lot of the forms set out for me here. So I'm just gonna push out the obliques over here a bit. Maybe this area a bit as well. Push in this area a bit for the abs. And yeah, so again, you have to go back and forth, work on the proportions, on the shapes at this stage, and keep things really, really simple. So I can use the Sculpt Draw brush to quickly carve in with control over here some of the muscles. So I can start with the trapezius shape over here, so the dagger shape that I talked about. That connects like that and goes up over here. like this. So you can see how it has a dagger shape or something like that. And I can work on the latissimus dorsi. So it's just the back muscle over here. Again, use reference when sculpting. It'll make your life a lot easier instead of trying to figure things out like I'm doing over here. I'm just kidding. I know my anatomy, so I can kind of manage without any reference, but you need to definitely use reference when practicing. Otherwise, you won't be able to improve your work as you should. So anyways, here I drew some of the muscles really quickly, but I want to keep the shapes really simple. So I'm not going into every single muscle. I'm just keeping it really simple. For that chest, I can use the Sculpt draw brush here, maybe increase the strength a bit and just create the separation in the middle over here. And we can see already that I'm running out of polygons. So I'm going to have to, at a point, increase the count with remesh over here. But yeah, so I'm just going to keep the shapes really simple like that and create some of the forms. And you shouldn't be afraid to add volume again. So that's what I'm doing over here. And yeah. Like that, and maybe even give some love to the arms, even though again it's not really part of this video. I can definitely work it a bit, so I'm just going to use Ctrl R to remesh this area, and then with the Sculpt draw brush here, maybe increase the volume of the biceps a bit, maybe decrease the strength because it's a bit too strong for this part. I can also add some volume over here for the triceps, like that, and then maybe just push it backwards like that. I made it a bit too big with the Sculpt draw brush. So again, the biceps will be under over here. That's where it goes. And maybe add in the volume of the arms over here by pulling out the forms with the grab brush and maybe pulling out this area for the elbows. And then I can go to this. So to switch between one object and another, you can use Alt-Q in the more recent Blender versions, and it will do that. I'm not used to sculpting that way. That's why I go out of sculpt mode and then select another object and go back into sculpt mode when going from one object to another by default. So here I can just, again, just quickly sculpt in the forms of the forearm like that. Just trying to make it look presentable for you guys. And yeah, but again, not the focus of this video, so I won't stay over here too long. I'm just quickly trying to give it a nice form over here and move back to the torso after that. All right, so I'm going to smooth this area, maybe increase the strength of the smooth. So I'm going to go to the smooth brush over here, increase the strength a bit so that I can quickly work this form over here like this. All right, and call it good for now and go back over here to the torso. All right, so back to the torso. Let's see, maybe we can start adding details. So I can go to sculpt mode. I can increase the detail size here by decreasing this number. So 0.05 maybe, and then quickly smooth things out, but not too much, not like this. So maybe decrease the strength of the smooth brush like this, and then quickly just slightly smooth some areas over here like this. Right, so again, you want to play around with the strength of the smooth brush. You don't want to get rid of all of the details you're working on whenever smoothing things, because that's a mistake that I see people do quite often, that they smooth every area out, and you shouldn't. So I'm going to use Ctrl R again over here to remesh and recalculate the topology, and then maybe use the crease brush and work the form of the chest over here like that, and then go under, and I can basically just work the form of the whole body like this. Perfect. And again, I'm still keeping the form simple, even though I increased the detail size. I just slightly decreased it to work on these muscles a bit separately, but still keeping the forms really, really nice and simple. So really big shapes and nothing more. All right, so here I'm working on the abs, just adding the forms here a bit. I'll go back to the oblique. So you can see I'm just basically going back to the forms I already created in the previous step, the previous stage. And maybe use the crease brush to create the separation over here, like that. this creased part of the body. So the more you're ripped, the more you'll see these separations of these muscles. So obviously I could go ahead right away and start adding details, separating the abs and then adding more muscles over here. But the point here is just to keep the forms really simple at first, work on the proportions, on the shapes until you're satisfied, and then you can go ahead and add in all the details you want, especially if you have reference. That will be really helpful at that stage, because looking at all of these little details of the body can be very helpful in sculpting. No matter how much experience you have, always having reference is great. So here in the back, I'm just gonna quickly use the crease brush over here to quickly separate some of these muscles and try to work this lower part a bit like this. And maybe the trapezius a bit as well. I'll just use the clay strips. And I love the clay strips to add in some muscles. You can see how I'm using my hands to add in some form over here like that. And that's one of the the reasons I show my screen, is so that you can see how I'm sculpting, how I'm moving my brushes. I think that can be very, very, very helpful to show you how to sculpt, because that's something you don't see often when people teach these kind of things. All right, so here I'm pretty happy with most of the forms. As you can see, we have most of the muscles, the basic forms. Even though they're just big blocks at this point, it's going to be really easy to go from here and start in sculpting details. So I'm gonna just go back to the proportions here a bit and kind of see if everything's working for me. Just quickly working on the chest first. Maybe use the draw brush and increase the strength a bit like that, and then kind of create this separation again. It's kind of lacking. And maybe add in some form over here for the start of the chest like that. That's connected, this part that's connected to the clavicle. And yeah, the muscles of the chest will go from here. They'll connect down to this part over here. So I'm just, basically that's why I'm sculpting this way, but that's kind of advanced. You don't have to do it that way. But if you look at reference and you look at how muscles go, the directions of the muscles, you can sculpt on the directions of the muscles like this, the same directions. It adds a nice touch. So now I'm going to look at the proportions. So I'm going to go again with my hands and just do this. Okay, cool. 1, it's around where the nipples are. That's great. 2, that's where the belly button will be. So I can always use the crease brush or any other brush over here and just quickly mark this. And then basically we have the chest, the belly button, one more time over here, and that'll be the bottom of the crotch like this. And then I can just continue to work the forms until I am satisfied, right? So maybe add in more details for this separation over here. If you want, you can always increase this number and you can go backwards. So if you increase it too much and you want to change the proportions a bit, it's going to be harder at this stage because you have a lot of details, which is normal. So you can always just decrease that number. I mean, change that number again, increase it to decrease the topology, and basically work your way down again. All right. So here I'm going to work on the neck muscle again. I'm just going to quickly add in some clay strips over here like that. Maybe remove a bit from this area and then work on the Adam's apple. So I'm going to add some form over here like this. And you can see how it's actually simple. It does take a lot of experience to get things done fast, to work without reference like this. But with time, as long as you do this enough and you work on your sculpting mileage a lot, like you sculpt a lot, you'll be surprised how fast you can improve. So definitely do this exercise. You know, try to sculpt parts of the body and keeping the shapes simple like this before getting into details, working on the forms, on the proportions, and yeah, you'll be surprised how fast you can improve doing that. So I think at this stage, a lot of these parts are good to go, right? And you don't really have to go any further. We can definitely go to the arms and give them some love again, because now this part has a lot more details than this part over here. So I can go over here, I can go to remesh, decrease this number, so 0.05, like that, and then maybe smooth this area like this. And then I can use the grab brush, work on the proportions a bit, like this. Maybe even the volume, for example, increase the volume of the triceps over here a bit. And again, I'm paying attention to all sides, or at least I'm trying to. It's kind of hard to focus over here while recording and talking at the same time. But you want to pay attention to all the sides over here and try to get the proportions right. So you can see how I'm now moving the arms forward like this. And yeah, at this stage, again, it's very easy to change the forms, to change the proportions, to work on all of that. So I'm just gonna quickly work the muscles over here. I'm gonna use the Sculpt draw brush to quickly create big forms and just remove from the forms with control, or without control, I can add forms like that. And I'm slightly applying pressure with my draw brush. I don't wanna overdo these shapes because the overall volume of the arm corresponds to the body. So I shouldn't change that too much. And we can see it's not really affecting the other parts because I have symmetry off, so I turned it on. And yeah, that's looking good. Maybe I can work the lower part over here, and I can definitely connect the forearm with the upper arm. I don't really need them separate, so I can just click on this, Control J, go to sculpt mode, Control R for remesh to join these areas. And this way I can work this area and it'll look a lot better connected than it did earlier. It'll make more sense. I'll just use symmetry again to fix this part. And then go over here, maybe just quickly add the elbows. And again, I'm not too worried about anatomy right now. I'm just working on the general forms like that. Because once you finish with the blockout of your character, you'll be able to quickly add in details. If this part looks good, honestly, when you start adding details, you'll see that it'll work a lot better and it'll look better than if you jump into details right away, because you're going to struggle a lot trying to fix proportions after you work in all of the details, after you add in all of the muscles. There'll just be a lot of struggle, and it's honestly not worth it unless you know what you're doing and you're used to like sculpting these parts and you're not afraid to jump into details right away because you know what you're doing. At that point, sure, you can skip this part, but even I go and do this part quite often, unless I just feel like sculpting in a different way, right? So again, I'm just working forearm muscles over here. Don't worry about the details of this. What you want to do when you're sculpting, again, have reference and then just pay attention to the forms of the reference at first until you learn your anatomy. Again, I do have a sculpting course with an explanation on these muscles, on the forms and all of that. So definitely check it out. It's in the link in the description below that you can check out. There we go. Okay, so this is starting to look good. I don't think I need to go any further at this stage. I just like to keep every part of what I'm sculpting around the same level like I'm doing over here. So I'm trying to get the arms to around the same level of the body really fast without wasting too much, so that I don't waste your time, but you can definitely learn from what I'm doing over here, so that's fine. And then I'm just gonna go around every area over here and just every angle, sorry, and just quickly just fix the proportions as best as I can while talking. Again, this really complicates the sculpting process. This would go a lot faster if I didn't have to talk, but yeah. All right, that's awesome. That looks overall good. I can just go over here. Maybe I can go to the head and then use the clay strips and just maybe mark some of these plane changes. So the side of the face over here, maybe the front part of the head. And it's not really a complete waste of time doing that because Again, it will help with the proportions. You might be able to better see the proportions of the head and see if you need to correct some stuff. And don't forget that the proportion of one part of the body or the head or anything like that will affect the rest. So this is the really tricky part when sculpting or drawing or anything really related to art, is getting the proportions right. This is one of the trickiest part, and I think one of the things that beginners struggle with the most. So if you learn how to do that, and if you work a lot on that, your arts and your work will improve drastically. So definitely something you want to focus on. All right, so you can see how it's looking great at this point. We already have something that really resembles a torso. So far so good. Of course, ideally, if I'm not recording, I'll be able to focus more on the proportions. For example, the head here is a bit too small for the rest of the body. So I can quickly just shape the body, make it smaller, or make the head bigger, or both, and kind of fix that. So I'll have to go back and forth and work all of the proportions whenever I change something. So again, it's good to do that in the early stages, instead of getting too held up with details from the start and then having to deal with changing everything with all of that details already sculpted in, which would be a lot more trouble. So yeah, definitely good at this stage. The proportions look great, more or less. Again, I'm recording at the same time, so it's hard to focus 100% and get this right. But what I want to do right now is show you the start of adding some details from this part, from this stage. So here I can just maybe join the arms with the rest of the body, or I can keep it separately. I'll join the parts, so I'll basically grab both of these, use Ctrl J, and then use Ctrl R to remesh. But you're gonna see how the poly count won't be enough to work these areas that are in contact. So I'm just gonna use Ctrl Z and decrease this to 0.025. And that's the disadvantage of connecting it a bit too early at the stage, but that's fine, I'll be able to manage. So I'm gonna use Ctrl R to basically merge them together. So you can still see that I could have used a lower number for this part, but then it'll be way too low to work with. So for now, this is fine. And this is gonna make joining these areas a lot better. It's gonna look a lot better over here by having these connected instead of separate. So you can see how I'm just working the muscles of the shoulders over here, and I'm smoothing things out. But when I'm smoothing, I'm not smoothing everything. So I'm not smoothing this whole area, otherwise I'm gonna lose a lot of these nice details. So I choose which areas to smooth, and you should too. And then I can basically go over here, I can use the crease brush and then really work the forms of the muscles over here. So I can basically start separating the abs over here. So I can just do that. And right now I'm just keeping it really basic. I'm just still working the proportions a bit while I'm doing it. And then I can refine the shapes more when I'm happy with the rest. So I can just go over here, work the belly button a bit, use the grab brush, change the shape a bit before working it too much, smooth things out when I need to. I can use the Sculpt draw brush over here, maybe decrease the strength, and I can increase the volume over here of the abs if I want to, or just keep it the way it is. It really depends on what you're going for. So you can see how you can quickly start adding details that way. Maybe even add some crease brush over here to add in more muscles. I think it's a bit too strong, so I'm going to decrease the strength like that. And then I will start connecting some of the muscles over here, creating them with the crease brush, a bit more over here. Again, go ahead, look at reference when you're doing this. It's going to make your life a lot easier. This is through a lot of experience. I know my anatomy quite enough to basically fake some of these muscles. And I say fake because no matter how much, how well your memory is, you're really working with memory, and it's not going to be as accurate as it would be if you have reference. So I'm giving the illusion of these muscles. I'm not really working on a reference and getting the most accurate results, but you can see that it still works when you know your anatomy enough. You can still get something to resemble what you're going for. So again, it's just going back and forth, and you can see how I'm quickly adding details over here. It's really starting to shape up to look like a torso, and the muscles are really starting to pop out. So I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of add in some muscles all over here, and just refine these areas, refine these muscles a bit, and just quickly get something done. So I don't want to spend too much time and make this video longer than it should be. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, I think this looks great. It gives you a pretty good idea of how this works, so that you can do it yourself, and so that you can give this a go by yourself and practice. And once you're done, definitely share your work and share this video as well. So I'll add a hashtag somewhere so that you can use once you're done, so that you show me your work and so that you share it with people, and maybe give this video some exposure, so that more people can watch and learn how to sculpt. So yeah, definitely do that. Give it a go and keep on doing that. Keep on sculpting, keep on doing different iterations of this. Don't sculpt just one torso and call it done and think that you know, you're good to go, you know how to sculpt a torso or anything like that. It really takes a lot of practice, and it takes you just gotta keep on doing it. I mean, even up until today, I like to do these anatomy quick sculpts in practice, and they usually wouldn't take as long as this video is taken, because again, I'm recording, I'm not using reference, I'm talking at the same time, and it's very, very hard to focus on what I'm doing over here. So I'm going a bit slow. But these would go a lot faster, of course, if you have a lot of experience sculpting. If you don't, then for it to take even longer than what you're seeing over here is more than normal. So don't expect to go this fast if you are new at sculpting. You want to take your time, and you want to work these forms, focus on what you're working, try to learn from every stroke you're doing. Be intentional with your work, with the way you're practicing, and you'll be very, very surprised on how fast you can improve. So yeah, I didn't really spend a lot of time in the back over here. That's fine. I think what I'm trying to teach here is explained more or less through the front parts. The back part will be the same idea, nothing that different. But yeah, just, you know, the back's kind of complicated. The muscles, there's just a lot of muscles kind of merging into each other. Not really merging, but it looks like a lot of muscles are over each other, and it's just kind of hard to understand the muscles of the back when you're a beginner, but it gets easier with practice again. So don't worry too much about it. Don't worry too much about the specifics of each muscle at first. You're just working your basically you're working form. You're trying to learn at this point how to work form, how to work shapes, how to start off with your sculpts, and how to go from there. That's your main goal when sculpting at this stage. So you can see how it's starting to shape out really good, and what really is starting to make this look really good is the fact that we spend enough time in the early stage of getting the proportions to look acceptable, and for the forms to look acceptable as well, for the volume. Of course, it's not perfect. It's far from perfect. You can see how from this area, there's a lot of improvement to be done, for example. But yeah, it already has a really good start. So from here on, you can just go ahead and just add in as much details as you want, push it further, or you can just start a new sculpt if you're happy with this, if you've learned enough, and you can definitely go ahead with the new sculpt and practice again until you get a hang of it, and until you get enough experience to start doing this even without reference, or getting a good part of it down without reference and then going back to reference. So looking at reference and comparing your work to real anatomy, to real reference, and seeing what you could have done right, better, and what you could have improved. Yeah, so that pretty much sums up what I'm trying to teach here. All right, cool. Definitely don't hesitate to go back and fix proportions even after adding details, because I know you could end up getting lazy and thinking, okay, I added all of these details, I don't want to have to fix everything. But if something looks off, go ahead and fix it, because it's really a normal part of the process to fix proportions. Even if you do the first parts right and you basically work with big shapes first and try to get the proportions as good as you can, you're gonna end up having to do some corrections here and there. This is just a normal part of the process. So for example, the shoulders over here, they looked a bit hunched, like forwards, upwards like that, which is why I am basically just grabbing this area over here and just pulling it downwards like that. And this part was really big, so I'm fixing the proportions here as well. So I'm just using my hand over here and kind of deciding if I should increase this part, because visually, by looking at it, it seemed a little off. It seemed like this part was a bit too long. And this is something you end up developing as you sculpt more and as you look at more reference and learn from real reference and that kind of stuff, because you're going to end up noticing these parts that look off even without using reference. You're going to notice that, okay, this is not what it usually looks like. Something's off. And if you're not noticing that, you might have been working too long on your sculpt without taking a break. So take a break, zoom out, look at your sculpt from really far away. And if anything seems off, you can just go ahead and just move proportions, or definitely look at reference and compare your work to the reference and see if you need to do any adjustments. Here's another example of another torso that I sculpted. So these two are one of the same. This is just before I added in the details in this one. So this sculpt took me around the same time as this one that I just demonstrated throughout this video, but the proportions are a bit better because simply I wasn't recording or talking at the same time, so I was able to concentrate a bit more. Yeah, but basically it's the same idea. It's building in the big blocks first, adding the big shapes, and once you're happy with the proportions, you'd add in the details and get something similar to this over here. Of course, this can be pushed even further, adding in all the little details of the muscles, and you can definitely have fun with that. But I think really this is the most important stage. If you get the hang of this and you get this right, then your skill definitely will start to improve a lot, and then you can start having fun with adding in more details. So anywhere between this and this is fine. You don't want to go further than that if you still can't get something that looks decent. So keep on doing it, keep on sculpting different torsos, different kind of sculpts until you get the hang of this. Hey, what do you think? What do you think? No, not the pen, the character. What do you think? Did I do a good job? If you want to learn more, I got courses on sculpting, anatomy, and more. Check out my online store for more of that. I'll leave a link in the description below. I'll release more anatomy videos over here, so make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell to be the first to find out when I do. Cool. I'll see you in the next video. You are beautiful.